Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another video. I'm Ryan Beach, and the time has come for the Alabama Symphony Orchestra to return to the stage. Albeit not in the form of a full orchestra, but rather for me, a part of a brass quintet. Next week we have a rehearsal and a video capture service to record some brass quintet stuff that will be a part of a live streamed gala. Normally we have this gala at the beginning of the year. It got pushed to New Year's Eve so that we could video capture these things and provide it free of charge, actually, to anybody who wants to watch it. So I'll leave some information down below to that concert if you're interested in checking it out. One of the pieces that we're going to play on that concert is the Poulenc Trio for trumpet, trombone, and horn. And I've never played this piece before, and so I thought I would share with you what it looks like for me to take a piece from I've never played it all the way up to I'm ready to perform it. When I found out I was finally going to have a chance to play the Poulenc, I was talking to my wife about how excited I am to have the opportunity to write programs for this and actually do things the right way rather than just sort of hacking my way through and being prepared but not maybe maximally prepared because I didn't know how to do that. And she thought I should share it with you guys. And so again, that's what we're going to do. Before we get into that, though, I want to apply the gold method, these 4 pillars, to this particular project so you guys can see what that looks like in this context. So for the first pillar, your routine or your work must be goal-oriented. The goal for me is to play the Poulenc at my absolute highest level possible. The second pillar, your routine or your work, must have an optimal starting place. You'll see in a little bit that work is going to be at 50% for the first and the third movement and 65% for the second movement. It's not quite as technical, so I don't have to go quite as far back as it would on the other movements. The third pillar, your routine or your work, must have a logical progression. I'm just going to explain that to you. I'm going to show you the program. I'm going to walk you through how I did that so you can see what that looks like. And the fourth and final pillar, your routine or your work, should have a defined time frame. The time frame I have set for myself is 1 week to work on this piece, to learn it, and to be ready to perform. Let's get into the video. So for step 1, we're going to listen to the piece, find a great recording, listen to it, and get an idea of what's going on. Especially when learning a new piece of music, you're gonna want to make sure you know musically what's happening, what kind of stylistic elements you want to bring out in the work that you do in the practice room so that you're not aimlessly wandering, so to speak, and ingraining possibly bad habits, but maybe even amusical habits that, especially when playing slow, can sometimes seep in when we're not really clear about what we musically want to get out of the work in the practice room. So to start out, I'm going to listen to the whole piece, and I'm just going to make some notes about some stylistic things, maybe some difficult sections I'm going to want to really focus on or possibly isolate, and just, like I said, make a few of these notes so that I have an idea that when I make the program and start doing the work, I know what I'm trying to get out of it. For the first movement of the Poulenc, one of the things I noticed was the variety of articulation, and I also noticed that it has a large dynamic range, and so I want to make sure that at the slow tempos, I'm getting those things to come out. I also noticed in the lyrical part towards the beginning of the piece, it sounds like it's an E flat, it looks like it's an E flat, so the G's that are at the top of the staff, which are generally a sharp note on the trumpet, are going to be even more sharp because it's the third of the chord, so I want to make sure I'm working to ingrain that in the right spot and hear that in the right spot. And also there's a section on the second page, which is a little difficult, or it looks a little difficult, so I want to make sure that I'm extra focused, and I possibly might need to isolate that spot depending on how the work goes. My second movement thoughts are, it's pretty simple. It's lyric, it's not necessarily technically demanding, so my main focuses are going to be trying to figure out how to use my air, how to sustain my air so that the lyric playing stays there, but I'm not losing the sound on the soft end of things. How to coordinate the air, how to coordinate my tongue so everything works together. And for the third movement, we're back to the articulation variety and the dynamic contrast. And some of the articulations are actually a bit unexpected. We have this theme that keeps coming back over and over, but the articulations are a little bit different. The dynamics are a little bit different. So I really want to dial that in and make sure I'm paying attention, especially at the slow side of things, so that I ingrain those as good habits. So when I get to the performance, I'm not really having to think so deeply, rather just playing what I've ingrained. I don't think anybody would be surprised that this is the first step that we would go to. I know it myself, and I don't always do it, and I would bet a lot of you out there know that we should be doing this, but we don't always do it. The reason for me that it's important to do, especially for new pieces, is again that we want to make sure that the work we're doing has a musical purpose, and we're not just learning notes and rhythms, but we're learning notes and rhythms and articulations and dynamics in a musical context so that we're building the whole thing with all of our work and not having to back up later because we accidentally ingrained something improperly. So the next step in the process is to physically write out my program. So I have 1 week as my defined time frame. The first and the third movement are starting at 50%. The second movement is starting at 65%, and I need to figure out how to get it to performance tempos in that time. Let's jump over to the spreadsheet, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. All right, everyone, here we are in the program for the Poulenc trio that I've written. Where we start with the program is to get all the necessary information together. So we have here the Poulenc trio, movements 1, 2, and 3, and then we want to write down all the tempos that are relevant for our playing. So we have movement 1 has 5 different tempos throughout. Movement 2 has 1, and movement 3 has 1. And these numbers are going to be what is referenced down here at the various percentages. We'll talk about that in just a second. The next thing we want to do is make sure we know how long. Again, we're going to do it for a week for this program. So I almost never program for 7 days because I want a day off per week so I can rest, get mentally back into the game. So I have 6 days instead, and I would do this for longer if I had more time, but we have 1 day of running the piece to make sure I've done that before I would get to the actual rehearsal or performance, so I know what that feels like. So I have to get all of the work in 5 days. And so we start with movement 1. We have, you can see that there's more work on this day than there is on this day. So we have sort of an A day and a B day type vibe. The A day, I'm going to get a lot of work in on the first movement. And on the B day, we're going to do just a little bit to remind ourselves what it feels like, but we're not necessarily as invested in, quote, learning about it as we are just maintaining and holding until the next day where we get more work. That's just a preference of mine. I prefer to have an A day and a B day. I like being able to say, I'm going to focus on this today and tomorrow I'll focus on something else, but that's just me. So you can see we have 50%, 60%, 70%. And then the next day we have 65. So we're going up a few and then back a little bit to build in a buffer. And then we pick up where we left off and we go up to 90%. And then we come back just a little bit to build in a buffer where we hold. And then we pick up actually back here because all we needed to do is get it to 100%. So I didn't, if I just started here with 90, it would be 90, 100, but I wanted 3 repetitions. So we go here and then we run the piece. So we don't have anything on that particular day in terms of programming. Movement 2, we have 65%, right? That's the starting place. And so then we have 65 the next day. We have 2 repetitions, one at 70 and one at 80. And then we go 5% higher at 85 for our 1 repetition, 90 and 100. So this would be the other side of the B day. So I thought A day, I'll do a lot on the first movement. B day, I'll invest in the second movement. And then for movement 3, you can see it's all even, 2 repetitions. That's just to keep it so I didn't have 1 day that had more than the other days. Although it kind of ended up being the A day being a lot or a little bit more. So you can see on day 4, we hit 100%, so there's no work on day 5. It's important that not everything has to peak at exactly the same time. It's okay. So we just get it to 100%, and then we have a day off of working, and then we'll run it over here, and it's okay. Movement 3, 50, 60. We pick up where we left off, go up 70, pick up where we left off, and 80. So you can see, although this is 5 days, really, to get from start to finish, it's still progressing relatively slowly. And so this is what a program can look like for the Poulenc trio. This is the one that I ran this week. Technically today, I just finished up day 5. And so it worked pretty well. I feel very confident. I know what's going on. Of course, I need to play with other people and find out the nuances of how they're going to slow down and speed up and where they're feeling it. But I feel very confident that I know it well enough that I can really listen, put my attention elsewhere, and be able to really dive into playing chamber music and making moments rather than just thinking about my part. One thing I want to reinforce in this part right here is that it doesn't have to be complicated. If you want to write something that's more simple than that, then write something that's more simple. There's really no right or wrong way to do this. You just want to make sure that you start generally slower than you want to go and also that you get all of the work in. Whether you do that in a really simple way, again, or a complicated way is up to you. You don't have to do it the same way I do it, but like I said, it should be logical. That's the important part. It should make sense so we have a better chance of adhering to the program that we wrote. Another thing I want to note that I didn't really say earlier that I felt was better to be mentioned here is that one other thing about the Poulenc is the endurance component. There's not really a lot of rest, and so I want to make sure that I train this as well while I'm doing my program. So normally what I'm going to do is break these things into sections, and I'm going to practice the sections individually 1 or 2 or 3 times, whatever's programmed. But in this particular instance, I'm actually just trying to run the whole movement at these slower tempos and seeing if I can really get that stimulus of, I'm a little bit tired, can I continue going? I don't necessarily recommend this every single time or using slow tempos to drive endurance progression, but in this case, I know that's going to be something I'm going to deal with, so I want to know what that feels like. So I want to make sure that I adjust the way I would normally do things to meet the demands that this particular piece has. Before we move on to the last part of this process, I did want to mention that it may seem unnecessary to listen to the whole piece of music and then write this long program or complicated program before we ever touch our instruments, but I find it valuable because writing the program out first, listening makes sure that my work is going to be productive. I'm going to be able to establish good habits. I'm going to have a higher average quality of playing, and I just really believe that struggle is essential in our practice sessions, and doing it this way means that we're doing the right kind of struggle rather than trying to plan when we get into our practice session and we're very reactive and things feel bad, so then we start reacting and doing something different. Doing things this way means that we're going to be able to say, I think this plan will work, I'll stick to it, and if we made a good plan, then the practice session work will be just the right amount of hard, not too easy, and will be satisfied with the work. And for the final step of this process, we get the fun part. We actually now get to practice. What we're going to do is we're going to take the mental model, the musical model that we built in the first step, and we're going to infuse every single repetition, every single note of what we planned with that. So it's not only about learning the right notes and the right rhythms and things like that, but trying to get the right style involved as well. I'm going to demonstrate really quickly what it would look like to play at half tempo, get all the right notes and rhythms, but not necessarily be stylistically minded in the way that we play it at half tempo. Here's what that would sound like. And then here is a version of half tempo where I feel that not only are you getting the right notes and the rhythms, but the way you're approaching the slow tempo work is going to yield a better result when you want to perform at tempo and more stylistically appropriate. Here's what that would sound like. And finally, to get one more example in here about this half-tempo work, here's a section from the third movement where I find the articulations to be unusual, and so I have to really focus, especially at these slow tempos, to be able to get everything dialed in exactly the way it's written so that I know what to expect as I begin to build in tempo. The reason I showed you this half-tempo work instead of the full-tempo work is I really want to reinforce what it looks like to have an optimal starting place. You can hear I'm establishing good habits already. Most of my playing is at a very high level already. We want to build that right out of the gate and then just slowly hold it as we build in tempo. Unfortunately for some or all of us, this work is not very sexy. It doesn't look awesome. It's not something that you want to post to Instagram all the time and get tons of followers and likes and all that stuff. But this is, in my opinion, what deep and deliberate practice looks like. You're making a model, you're executing the model, and you're slowly refining it to get closer and closer to what you hear in your head. When practicing with repetitions in sort of the method that I use it, a lot of people get confused or just have troubles figuring out, should I do another repetition? Should I isolate something? Should I do some sort of alternative practice technique? So in order to help figure that out for you, I'm just going to give you this easy workflow, so to speak, that you can use for your own practicing to know what you should do next as a general rule. Because we have at most 3 repetitions in this particular plan, I'm going to make sure that I'm already thinking what I want to sound like before I ever play a note. There's really no testing involved. It's I have this plan and I'm going to see if I can do it. After you play your first repetition, you're going to ask yourself, was that what I heard in my head or was it not? If it was, just do the next repetition, see if you can do it a little bit faster and then a little bit faster. In an ideal world, we'd only just play the repetitions, everything will be perfect, and we would just build it that way. But because we don't live in a perfect world, most likely something is not going to be great or you're not going to be satisfied with some part of your first repetition. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to visualize a better way. You're going to try to think your way into better playing. The reason I think visualization is a good tool to go to right away is that we're not playing, so we're not wasting our face and beating our face up more. We're also not playing in this unsure way, possibly ingraining bad habits. Rather, we're flexing that mind-muscle connection, I guess, if you want to call it that, and trying to say, this is my plan. Can I adjust what I hear in my head to meet what I hear in my head a little bit better? And then you're going to try that on your second repetition to see if you were right. Hopefully you find that especially if you have done great tempo selection and you have a strong mental model and you're really going after it, that the second repetition would be what you wanted it to be. And then you'd say, great, I figured it out. Now I'll go on to my third and just hold it. If that's not the case, though, and something is still bothering you, this is when I would isolate. I would pull the measure out. I would do all the techniques, maybe slur it, maybe change the rhythms, maybe make it less dynamically complex and then add the dynamics back in. You're trying to build the model that you want and then put it back into context and then do your third repetition to see if that work actually helped. So that's the approach I have for learning a new piece of music. I hope you found this to be helpful or at least interesting to consider what you might be able to take and implement into your own practice. Again, I want to stress that there's no right or wrong way to do this, so if you find this to be too complicated, make it easier. As long as it makes sense and it's progressive, it will work, and then you'll learn something about how to do it next time, and we'll just continue to refine the process from there. I mentioned earlier that I'm learning the Poulenc for a brass quintet concert that will be video recorded, put on a live stream for our gala. It's December 31st at 7 p.m. I'll leave that link down below. So if you're interested in seeing the final result of this process, click on that link when it's time and you can check that out. All right, everybody, that is going to be all for this video. I hope seeing how I break down my process was helpful for you in building your own processes and being able to commit to them and knowing how to do that. If you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'd give it a like, hit the thumbs up down below, and don't forget to subscribe. That would really help out the channel a lot, and I'd appreciate it. If you have pieces of music that you're trying to learn and you want to take a lesson and we can talk about how to organize for that, I would love to talk to you there. Or if you want to become a client so you can learn how to do what I did in this video all on your own, I'll leave a link down below for a free 30-minute call where we can chat and we can see how I can best help you learn how to do this for yourself. Thank you so much for watching the video. Always remember, stay strong, be kind to yourself, never stop growing, and we'll see you in the next video.